What's going on there, YouTube? And welcome to Fresh Comic Stories. Guys, this is the channel where we basically sit down and cover different kinds of comic book stories. Now, guys, today we're gonna try something different. Something I have no idea on why I'm doing it. We're gonna cover a Before Watchmen title. We're gonna cover Before Watchmen, the Night Owl storyline. Now, this is only a 4-issue series that basically kind of give us the origin of Night Owl before the actual Watchmen title. And so guys, I do hope you enjoy this video. And if you do, please hit that like button down below and also subscribe for more comic book stories in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read? Well, let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. Now, guys, let's go ahead and dive into Before Watchmen, Night Owl. So when it comes to Before Watchmen, it is basically a bunch of short series that tell the story of each character before the actual Watchmen storyline. And so we pick up with the character Night Owl. Now, with his storyline, it is kind of strange, but at the same time, it tells us how he picked up the mantle of Night Owl. Now, the story does start off in the year 1962, and we pick up with the character Daniel DeBerg, who was Night Owl in the main Watchmen storyline. But we pick up with him when he is just a teenager having dinner with his family while the news channel is going off about different things happening in the world. But we quickly come to find out that he has a role model, and that is the original Night Owl. Remember, the Night Owl you saw in the main Watchmen storyline, which was Daniel, he was the second one. The first Night Owl who appeared in the early days of superheroes was Hollis Mason. But we see that Daniel looks up to Hollis as a role model, that he tries his hand on trying to meet Hollis for the first time. And so what Daniel does, he actually tries to follow Hollis back to his base of operations. Daniel actually goes to the scene where basically Hollis, who's the current Night Owl, just beat down on a few thugs. And so when Hollis get into his vehicle to head back home, you had Daniel put a tiny microphone on the vehicle so he can hear different sounds of the city as a way to figure out where Hollis' base is at. Of course, it actually does work out for Daniel. He was able to find the base of operations for Hollis. Now, to me, this is kind of cool, because instead of getting to the drop on Hollis, Hollis leaves him a message and basically says, meet him at a random location in the middle of the park. And when he gets there, he tries to impress Hollis about how he was able to find him and the tech he wants to build for Night Owl. But you have Hollis tell Daniel that he is lucky that he is just a kid, because if he wasn't, Hollis would have possibly shot Daniel to keep his secret identity, well, a secret. Now you have the story shift back over to the home of Daniel, and we quickly come to find out in this storyline that his father abuses his mother. He walks in and sees his dad is beating down on his mother, and we come to find out that his dad burned all of his Night Owl stuff because he felt like it was holding Daniel back from being a man. Now, the next page tells us real quick that Daniel's father died. We find this out because his mother says he had a heart attack. But with him having a heart attack in the funeral, you have Hollis meet up with Daniel after the service and says it is time for him to begin his training. Now the story does shift over to showing us the fact that you have Hollis training Daniel to become a better fighter. Now at first it does seem like Daniel is being trained to be a sidekick to Hollis, like a Robin to his Batman. But you don't have Hollis confirm or deny that it could happen that way. But when Daniel is at a diner having dinner, that is when he hears on the news channels that Holland is going to retire from being Night Owl. And for Daniel, this is shocking news because Holland never told him a thing about retiring at all. He even goes over to ask Holland what the heck is going on. And Holland says he feels like it is time for him to retire and move on with his life. But he is still going to train Daniel until he becomes ready to live up to the mantle of Night Owl. We then jump forward 3 years and we pick up with Daniel now being the new Night Owl for the first time. And with him going out fighting different thugs because there are riots going on around the city. But this is just DC showing us what led up to him taking over the mantle of Night Owl. Now when he does finish beating up on the thugs, you have him get back in his vehicle and he runs into Rorschach. This is huge because these two have a strange bond to one another, and so seeing these two kind of meet for the first time, it is DC showing us the beginning of their bond between one and another. We then jump forward another year and we pick up with the two of them arriving to go to a meeting they were called in for by another hero named Captain Metropolis. But a bunch of heroes from the Watchman universe were called in to form a Justice League, but try to call themselves the Crime Busters, which is a horrible name. Now you have the group try to get everyone to get to talk to each other to learn about each other, because they are really trying to form a superhero team here. But of course, it does not go very well, with everyone just leaving the place and they all go in their separate ways. But the biggest point of this moment is when Night Owl was at the meeting and he kind of fell in love with Silk Spectra. The big problem was that he did not even try to make a move on her, and that is really it. Now guys, give you the quick heads up. From this point and on, some pages will not be shown in this video. The reason why is because this storyline has some nudity in it. And honestly, I am not going to show any of that on my channel because I do not want YouTube to come at me saying, hey, you're putting soft porn out here. Stop doing that. Honestly, I'm going to play it safe and we're going to skip over those pages. Now, we do pick up with Rorschach and Night Owl right now out on parole, beating up a bunch of different thugs. Now the thing is, you do have a thug get away from the two characters and tries to go hide somewhere. The big thing is, you have Night Owl go follow this thug and they both run into the Twilight Lady. Now the Twilight Lady I can't show at this point because she is completely naked. She runs a brothel, but the thing is, she does stop the thug for Night Owl. Now when Rorschach catches up with the rest of the characters and he sees the Twilight Lady completely naked, he freaks out. He's kind of like, well, she's a bad girl, a horrible thing. And he calls her a bunch of horrible names because he's kind of like, dude, she's naked. She's in a brothel. She's a bad person. She's not a good person. We have to beat her up too. And you have Night Owl kind of like, we don't do that. She did not do anything wrong. Just leave her alone. Now the story does shift over to Rorschach, but is more explaining his origin story a tad bit here, but only for 2 pages. But you can quickly pick up on his origin story with the fact that he lives alone and miserable life in his apartment. He only watches the news about horrible things happening in the world. But the biggest thing about this quick tale of his origin is that we come to find out that his mother was in prostitution. And most nights she had someone over. And so with Rorschach, it was a hard life for him when he was a young boy because his mother was always having some random man over. Now we do jump forward a couple days and we pick up with Night Owl right now out on parole looking for something to do. That is when he gets report of a crime that happened. A young woman was murdered in her apartment. And so with that happening, you have Night Owl go check out what happened to her. Now, this is where things start to come together. There is a bigger case going on. Because when Night Owl asks the person who owns the apartment building, he tells Night Owl the cameras on this floor are the only ones that don't work. But to make the case somewhat more interesting is that Rorschach appears and says that there have been a bunch of girls being killed off, but all involved in prostitution. And so with them being involved in that, the police are not doing anything to help out. But this is when you have the writer of the story show us that basically both characters, Night Owl and Rorschach, have a problem with this because of their mothers, even though their mothers did not act the same at all. One mother was loving and caring, the other was basically just mean, which of course we know who belongs to who. Now the final part of the second chapter is used to kind of expand on Night Owl's origin story a tad bit more, because we are getting flashbacks on how he was always picked on for being a nerd, but always thinking he can be just like the original Night Owl, which was Hollis. But one day he really kept trying to fight back against his bullies, but he kept getting beat back down to the ground, to the point when he got home he looked all bruised up. Now his mother tries to use some makeup as a way to cover up his bruises, but while she is doing that, he asks his mother a question about when she was pregnant with him. This is where we come to find out that Daniel's parents only got married because his mother was pregnant with Daniel. But to close the second chapter of this story, we pick up with Night Owl going to the one person he believes that can help him with this case, which of course is the Twilight Lady, because she owns a brothel and women who are part of the prostitution life in the city are being killed off. And so maybe, just maybe, the Twilight Lady can help with this case. Now remember, when it comes to Twilight Lady, her character is someone who owns a brothel. And right now, she is basically helping Night Owl because, well, she loves the women in the city who work in the same field she does. But she also has a clue on who it could possibly be behind all of these murders in the city. But she is not just going to tell Night Owl the name of the person, but she's going to show him the house of the man who could be behind all of these murders in the city. Now we do jump back over to Rorschach. And this point right here, you have the writer kind of tell us that Rorschach, outside of being a superhero, he works at a church. Well, he actually volunteers at this church. But the thing is, you have this kind of telling us that Rorschach believes in what the pastor is saying here at this church. How, the world is going crazy. The world is going mad because of all the different things that are happening all over the world. But you have the pastor talk to Rorschach one-on-one saying that, listen, you just have to keep believing in my message. You have to keep believing in God's words. Because the thing is, the world can be changed if everybody just listens to what God has to say. If he just sit down and read the Bible. It's him kind of saying, Rorschach, I believe that you also believe in what I'm trying to do, which is make the world a better place. Now we jump over to Night Owl and also Twilight Lady as they go to a man's house named Carlos, who apparently had set up a prostitution ring in the city. And he's the one person who could have some information on who is killing all the different ladies in the city. Now you would think we would get some kind of big team up battle between these two characters. We don't actually. Instead, what we get is Twilight Lady leaving Night Owl behind, and he has to deal with this Carlos person on his own. Now, we don't have a drawn out battle here between Carlos' men and Night Owl. Instead, it is handled very quickly, and he is able to move on to questioning Carlos on does he know about the high body count of the women in the city. This is where he explained that basically when women get involved in this life, men pay high dollar amount, but after a few jobs, their worth drops to the point no one wants them except maybe a few guys in the city. Now, to close the third chapter of this story, we do jump over to Rorschach right now working in the church once again. But this time, you have the pastor go over to Rorschach and say, hey, listen, I need you to go into the basement and receive something for me. And so you have Rorschach go into the basement to receive that item. But when he opens up the door to the basement of the church, that is when he sees a bunch of dead bodies in the church of women who could possibly belong to the prostitution ring, which means the pastor is the one going around killing all these different women. But the thing is, when Rorschach goes to change into his outfit and about to go fight against the pastor does get the jump on Rorschach and shoot Rorschach right in the shoulder and says, I knew you would basically betray me. I was hoping you would basically join me and help me to make the city a better place. Now, the final chapter of this story is of course used as a way to wrap everything up, and that is really it. And so we do get the reason why the pastor killed all of these women by telling Rorschach after tying him down. And you have the pastor say, listen, I met up with a woman who's part of the prostitution ring. And the thing is, I was paying her money to sleep with her. But then she realized that I am a pastor. That means I have a church. But the church she knows I work for does get a lot of money, donations from rich people. And so she basically told me that she would start to blackmail me if I did not pay her $1,000 per week. And so with that right there, he starts to freak out, because if word gets out with him sleeping around with this woman, well, hey, he loses the church, his wife, and all the money he gained from the church. And so he killed her off. But the thing is, he didn't stop there. After killing her off, something awoke in him, as he says, and he felt like he should go around the city and killing off different women who are part of the prostitution ring. Now, of course, the pastor locks Rorschach in the basement with all of the dead bodies and lights everything in the room on fire as a way to burn any evidence of what he has done. Now, of course, Night Owl and Twilight Lady do make it in time, and they break up to complete both their goals, which is to save Rorschach and also stop the pastor from getting away with all of this crazy stuff, which does lead to Night Owl able to save Rorschach from being burned alive, and they go join Twilight Lady fighting against the pastor. We do get a few pages of them fighting, but the biggest thing about the fight is Rorschach kills the pastor, which is huge for Night Owl, because heroes are not supposed to kill. That is like the golden rule for Night Owl. But for Rorschach, it's like sometimes you have to kill. That is something you have to understand. Sometimes you have to cross that line. Now, we do jump forward a couple days with Night Owl meeting up with Rorschach. Now, this is Night Owl telling Rorschach, hey, listen, I am not going to the police with the information about you killing off the pastor, but we need to have a talk about the golden rule. Heroes do not kill. We do not cross that line at all. But you have Rorschach once again tell Night Owl, dude, you have to cross that line sometimes. And the thing is, that is the big difference between you and me. I'm not afraid to cross that line. but you are. You need me there to be that person to cross that line. And so while they're having this conversation, this is where you kind of have the story expand more on the origin of Rorschach. And we come to find out when Rorschach was a young boy, he killed off one of the men who came over to be with his mother. He got tired of random men coming over day after day to sleep with his mother. And so one day he felt like just killing one of them off. And he did. And once again, he tells Night Owl, sometimes you just have to cross that line. Now, to close off the story, you have Night Owl go to meet up with Twilight Lady one more time to kind of build a relationship with her, because he fell in love with her. He's kind of like, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, I can have one more chance with her and we can actually form a relationship. But when he goes over to her house, or her brothel actually, and when he walks inside, she left. She packed everything up and just disappeared. She is long gone. And that's her saying, listen, I loved you too. But the thing is, I do not do great in relationships. And I do not want to hurt you or break your heart. That is one thing I cannot afford to do. And so she leaves. She leaves Night Owl behind. And that's the end of the story. And that's it. And so guys, please leave me a like down below and also subscribe for more comic book stories in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read, well, let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I'm out of here and I'll see you on the next comic book video. Later, guys.